part of it comes about because of this belief in hospitality that we always want to exceed customers' expectations.
Mhm.
And by always trying to exceed customers' expectations, we keep giving them more and more, and we keep teaching them to want more and more. So that's kind of our model. So we've applied it to healthcare. But I think if you're not in healthcare and you're listening to this podcast because you love hotels, think about, what am I doing to prepare for our guests? How am I anticipating their emotional reactions? How am I using color and scent to do that? How am I engaging?
I'm Farah Shammas. Welcome to Hotel Talk. We hope you enjoy listening to this friendly conversation between people connected by real life in hotels. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Hotel Talk here with me, Farah Shammas. And this one is on Zoom, which is slightly different to our usual one recorded in our studio. But there is a very, very good reason for that, because I'm joined today by someone very dear to my heart, actually, Mr. Stowe Shoemaker, who is, or I should say professor, who is all the way from the US, who couldn't fly over to Cyprus just to be on this podcast, but hopefully one day, you never know. He actually taught me back in 2008 when I went to Cornell for a course on finance in hospitality, and his team contacted us here in Cyprus, which is wonderful news, without knowing this connection or that we know each other, and asked about this podcast and if I'd like to interview him for his upcoming or his just recently released book. So he's going to tell us more about that. Stowe, welcome so much.
Well, it's great to be on the program, and it's great to see you again. And yes, it seems 2008 seems like a long time ago, but it was
Long time ago, but
really
we haven't
fun
changed.
Time to be in. We haven't changed a bit. It was great to be in Ithaca, New York at Cornell, and it's an amazing institution and an amazing executive education program. So it was
really
great.
Is.
So honored to be on the program tonight or today.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I didn't do the introduction because I know that you can explain to everyone much better than me where you are and what you do. But I know that you are now currently, not for the last 10 years, at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, and you've been the dean since 2013, so it's 10 years now. And and I read also that there's a special foundation that's been set up as well in honor of that. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about this before we dive into your other achievements.
I've always been an academic for the last 20 years. But the last 10 years, I was the dean at the William F. Farrer College of Hospitality. Proud to say that we're the #1 hotel school in the world by one ranking, #2 by another. But certainly #1 in the United States, way ahead of our alma mater, Cornell. But 10 years is a long time to be dean. So the university has a foundation, and the role of the university foundation is to kind of raise funds to support university initiatives. So I've been asked to move to the foundation to be the special assistant to the president of the foundation. I was very fortunate in my time as the dean to raise over about $50 million US, and we built a whole new building for Hospitality Hall. And so it's an exciting time to be in hospitality.
Wow, huge congratulations. That's mind-blowing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we have had a great team to work with, and great students and everything.
So maybe we can rewind now and go back to baby Stowe and see where were you born? Like who was the baby and the child and the parents behind the academic and the author and the best-selling author that you've now become?
Well, I think when I was a kid, I grew up in this obviously United States in Pennsylvania, and I remember my grandmother always saying to me, you should go into hospitality because you love people and you like to play. And I always was putting on dinner parties at my house, and I'd have everybody over and I'd be cooking and all of that. And so I just sort of ended up just really falling in love with hospitality. And so when I started looking at colleges, back when I went to undergraduate, there weren't a lot of hospitality schools. I mean, there was Cornell, there was really UNLV had just started a program, and there was kind of Michigan State and the University of Denver. Well, I couldn't afford Cornell, and so my parents were like, "Well, just go get a business degree because hospitality is a business." And so I went to the University of Vermont and did that. But I took some quantity food production courses in the School of Nutrition. And through that, I met a professor who was an adjunct professor who ran a resort in Vermont. And so I ended up working with him for 2 years. He ended up buying a property in Middlebury, Vermont. And so I worked with him for 8 years in really running this 75-room hotel, which seems,
Wow.
now living in Vegas, 75 rooms is like half a floor. But in Vermont, it was huge. And but I was always curious about why did people do the things they wanted to do, right? I was very interested in the psychology of travel. So I went and did a master's degree at the University of Massachusetts. And when I was finishing up my master's, I was asked to stay and do a PhD, but I was like, I didn't feel I knew enough. But I loved marketing. And if you really love marketing, you have to really understand the consumer, right? Because the consumer we write marketing strategy and marketing plans with the consumer in mind. And the way we understand the consumer is through consumer research. So I took a job in Southern California really doing consumer research, where we created this chicken soft taco for Taco Bell, which is a huge product in the United States. Did work with Marriott when they were developing their hotels, and spent 5 years doing a lot of heavy consumer research. And then I went back to Cornell to get the PhD. So my childhood was really always hospitality. All through high school and college, I worked in the kitchens. I started like everybody who's in hospitality here in the dish room, and washed a lot of pots and pans and peeled potatoes and became a sous chef. And it's in your blood, right? Hospitality, it's not a job, it's a passion.
It's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle.
That's where people get confused. Exactly. I'd love to hear more about the psychology side, and I'm always interested in that and why people do what they do. And my goodness, have we needed it during this whole pandemic? And then the kind of during the lockdowns and the in-betweens and then afterwards. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of us, I mean, I'm very happy to admit that I gave a talk during COVID about the post-COVID guest. And, I was off on so many points, like what I thought would come out of this whole mess of COVID, that we'd get people, more introverted, wanting to stay in their rooms, room service, everything else. And it was the opposite. People couldn't wait to get out, and go back to what they knew. So that's quite interesting. I mean, I'd be really interested to talk more about that as well, and what you've discovered.
Yeah, so I think I did an interesting study, a huge research project for the governor of Nevada, to really look at people's travel behaviors, what they, post-COVID or during COVID, and what would get them to travel more. And in the research, we really found that there was just going to be this huge pent-up demand. I mean, people wanted to get away. They wanted to get out of the house.
Absolutely. And they spent 2 years planning it.
They spent 2 years planning it, and they saved their money because they couldn't spend money. And if they were fortunate enough to keep their job, they sort of bankrolled their money. And so we had this, when COVID ended, this huge revenge travel. And, I think the thing, when you talk about the consumer psychology, kind of one of my favorite sayings was by a gentleman named Theodore Levitt, who was really a famous marketing person at Harvard Business School. And I would have told you this story when you were in my class. But he said that consumers don't buy quarter-inch drills. They buy quarter-inch holes. In other words, we don't buy a drill bit, but we buy the hole that the drill creates. And so when you think about COVID, we're not really buying a hotel room. we're buying an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And
it
that's
is all
really
about
led to the
experience.
whole experience economy. So
Mm-hmm.
people needed to get away. And that's what we were selling in hospitality, is the opportunity to get away, to interact, be with
Create
other people.
memories.
Yeah, and create memories. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been pretty exciting on
But
the
what
psychology
shocked
side.
me, yeah, just to go into it a bit more, what really surprised me was the tolerance level of people. I thought I would have expected, or at least in my personal experience, I came out, I think, quite calm, you know, very grateful for whatever experience I could get after COVID. Yeah, maybe a bit kinder, more tolerant. But our guests, I found the complete opposite. They would come in, and if there was one glitch at reception, or if their room key was given to them 30 seconds later than they wanted, they would be having a hissy fit in the lobby. The level of tolerance was like zero. People were angry. They had all this pent up aggression. I think that they built up this holiday experience in their mind so much that if one thing, if their drink didn't taste the way they wanted it to, or whatever it was, there was too much milk in their coffee, they were really getting upset. Obviously that's not 100% of the guests, but many, we were quite shocked. And it did take a while for things to kind of calm down. I don't know if you experienced that or saw anything
Yes,
similar.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, part of it comes about because of this belief in hospitality that we always want to exceed customers' expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And by always trying to exceed customers' expectations, we keep giving them more and more, and we keep teaching them to want more and more. And so obviously the cost of doing that goes up. Now, coming back from COVID, everybody's a little rusty because people hadn't been working, right? So as staff, we're a little slower. But because the guests had come in their mind, had remembered what things were like in the past, they had been reading and watching TV about experiences. And so they came in with much higher expectations. And so we as an industry, and certainly in Las Vegas, really had to reset those expectations. And we always want to remind the customer that they're getting great service. And we talk about what we talk about what we call the Raider system, which is reliability, assurance, tangible, empathy, and responsiveness. So that every interaction we have with the customer, we want to somehow show we're reliable, somehow assure them, somehow make the visit tangible. And then that way we don't have to keep giving them more and more. We just have to remind them that they're getting what they paid for. And that's been a whole reset. But you're right, coming out of COVID, there was such a huge demand and people were just anxious and they wanted everything all at once.
Yeah. It was crazy. So tell us a bit about, because you've been teaching for a long time. I'd love to pick your brains on teaching and the highs and lows of that. But also to get into like the different courses that you teach, because they're quite diverse. It's not just hospitality marketing. You teach revenue management and pricing, you teach, service operations. Obviously, you're from a food and beverage background that you just mentioned in the kitchen. So you can bring a lot to the table. So I'd love to hear a bit about both of those aspects before we go into your books.
Okay. Well, I think what's sort of the whole theme of my academic career is really looking about how do we really understand the customer, and how do we provide great experiences for the customer. So when I finished my degree at Cornell, my PhD was in really learning and memory, which is how I came around understanding how expectations are formed. And then when I started doing a lot of work in customer loyalty and loyalty programs, just a course you took with me. And I wrote a case study on Hilton Honors, on the Hilton program. I worked with Hyatt on their program. I also worked with Accor when Accor became asset light and they came up with their whole new loyalty program. I did all the research for them. And I just loved everything about loving the customer and how do we create these great relationships. But at the same time, what was happening was revenue management entered our business. right? So we had one half of the group doing everything to love the customer. And we had the other half of the group trying to basically take advantage of the customer with pricing, demand-based pricing. And in my research on loyalty, I found that if a company practiced opportunistic behavior by charging more because they could, then the customer would become less loyal. So I had to figure out, well, how do we bring pricing and loyalty back in together? And what I realized, having read an article way back, like in the late 1990s, early 2000s, I read an article called Prospect Theory, which really is the foundation, what's now known as behavioral economics. And basically, so I learned about revenue management and pricing so that I could be better talking about marketing. And what I discovered with behavioral economics, it was really all about choices. So I was asked to give a talk at an airline conference to talk about how hotels price. And I had enough of an ego to get up and say, I'm not here to tell you how hotels price, because they basically price like you do.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to do is I want to tell you how you should price, or give you a way to think about pricing. So British Airways said, I think you might have something to say. Would you come to Europe? And I was like, living in the States, I was like, are you kidding? Of course I'll come to London. And they said, we don't have any money, but we'll fly you over. And so if you've ever been to, well, I'm sure you've all now been to the BA.com website,
Mm-hmm.
where you have the calendar
Many
approach.
times, yeah.
And so that was all me. And I said,
Oh, well done. Yeah, I mean, we use it all the time.
Yeah, I said to people, I said, tell me when you want to fly, and I'll tell you what you have to pay. Tell me what you want to pay, and I'll tell you when you can fly. And so the whole idea was, what we did is we gave the customer choice.
Mm-hmm.
They felt
Autonomy.
like they were making a decision, right? So now suddenly they didn't feel like they were being ripped off, because they made the decision of when they wanted to do that. And British Airways wanted me to publish an article on that, which I did, of course, because they wanted all the other airlines to price the same way. And now you see that all with hotels, everybody does a calendar approach. And that's really how I brought marketing and pricing together, all surrounded around it, creating great experiences by understanding operations. So while they seem like different topics, they're all related, because they all put the customer at the center. And how do we create this relationship for the customer?
Yeah, I love that. Being customer centric is so important. And it's so interesting watching hospitality evolve over the
Yes.
decades. I mean, it really has been for me, and I can't imagine for you. So tell us a bit about your books, because you've just released your third book.
Yes.
Which is on, going into medical care. There it is.
It's called Hospitable Healthcare, just what the patient ordered. And, in the hospitality business, we've done such a great job over the last 50 years in creating great guest experiences. And I think ask every one of the listeners to think about their last visit to a doctor or a walk-in clinic or a hospital. It probably was a very different experience than when they went and stayed in a hotel. And so when I was teaching at the University of Houston, sort of between Cornell and UNLV, I ended up working at MD Anderson, the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, which is really the #1 cancer center in the world. And they asked me to say, how do we create a better patient experience for our patients? And so I ended up working with them for a couple of years, did some other work in healthcare. And my co-author, Peter Yesevich, had a huge marketing agency, hospitality marketing company, sold that. And he spent 10 years working with Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And he had helped me on my other 2 books. And so we said, hey, let's help, see if we can help improve healthcare. And so basically what we did is we went out and we surveyed 1,200 people in the United States, all geographically balanced and demographically balanced. to really see, is there a real difference between healthcare and hospitality? And of course, we found there was. So then we said, okay, well, let's look at the data. So our book is filled with data, but then let's try to trace the history of hospitality. What did they do that made it where they are now? How can we bring that into healthcare? And where are the real pain points in healthcare, and how do we bring hospitality principles into it? So I don't know if that's kind of a big analogy, but that's how we got into it.
I
and
love
I can
that.
tell you some specifics.
Yes, well, I would like to know more. I mean, I also comment so many times on that. I remember when I gave birth, well, to my 3 kids, but especially my first, and was charged quite a lot of money for the suite if I wanted a suite in the hospital. And I was just laughing with my husband because I said, I wish I charged these rates in the hotel and then gave, what they gave. I mean, the food, horrific, the service, no smiles, like very, I don't know. The whole
Yeah.
experience was definitely not one that you want to repeat soon. And it's a shame because people need that extra love and care and empathy and attention. I think maybe in America it's slightly better. I mean, we did have one experience in my family where we had to visit, not for myself, but for someone else, the Mayo Clinic. And I was blown away with how well the Mayo Clinic did everything, especially when it came to children, compared to anything I'd ever seen in Europe.
And I mean, I think so. U.S. has some great hospitals, but they also have some hospitals that really could use some understanding of the patient. So my wife did her PhD from Texas A&M, and she helped on the research at MD Anderson. And what she found was that, are they patients? Are they customers?
Yeah.
And what she found was that they want to be treated like loved family members. So that became the premise of her book. Well, how did hotels make people feel like loved family members? What do we do in healthcare to do that? And so, when we kind of came up with what we called a hospitality deficit. Well, the first real deficit is, in hotels, you always know what you're going to pay and you know what the cost of the service provided is. In healthcare, you're just shocked on the bills. The second thing deficit.
Well, because it's a variable, it changes all the time depending on what's wrong with you as well.
Right.
Yeah.
But they don't even tell you in advance what could be. Another deficit is, in hotels we're really appreciated and their business is appreciated. In healthcare, not so much. Another deficit was, think about going into a doctor's office. It's not very welcoming. You probably had to fill out the same form that you filled out last time, right? Where when we walk into a hotel, everything's already been done. The fourth deficit, and I apologize, I'm turning to my pages, is the service logistics, right? Usually we can get an appointment in a hotel. It's pretty easy to find out where we want to stay. There's the calendars. In healthcare, it's kind of just random. And then the last deficit that we have really has to do with the service assessments. In hotels, you stay at a hotel, the next night you get a survey to see how well we did. In healthcare, it's no one ever calls. It's all really random. So we said, we have these 5 deficits. Well, how do we solve them? And how did the hospitality industry solve them? So in the book, we interview people from the Mayo Clinic, from the Cleveland Clinic, but we also interview people like Horst Schulze, and other hospitality executives who have done amazing things to find out what have they really done to create that great experience, and how can that be translated into healthcare. And so the book is very applied. And the other thing that was really important about the book is very easy to think about giving 5-star service if people are willing to pay a lot of money. But in the United States, we have where we have great healthcare, it's very uneven in the sense that if you're very wealthy, you can get great care. If you're a Medicare patient, which is government, which is very limited, it's really hard for hospitals. They don't understand how to provide that great service. Our book basically says in hospitality, You have a Formula One in Europe. It's a great price, but it creates a great experience for what you're paying for. You stay at the Plaza Antennae. It's a great experience for the great price. And what we show in the book by our principles is that no matter what the person's paying, we can create an experience so they feel like a loved family members. And I think that's what I'm most excited about with the book.
Well, I think it sounds amazing, and something that not just every hospital, but every medic and doctor and healthcare professional should definitely have on hand and be reading. That's amazing. And you published it now, didn't you? It's very recent.
It just came out a couple of days ago. Yeah, it's September 5th.
Amazing. So
but
exciting.
I think there's also, the other thing that I think can be used just for hospitality people is the model that we came up with after investigating hospitality and healthcare was what we called the payer model. Because in the United States, you have payers who pay for the things. But the payer model, and if you think about this, this is really a great way to think about our own business in hospitality. What do? The first P is we prepare for the visit, right? We know how many people are coming, right? We have an estimate. We use statistics to tell when the demand's going to be busy at the front desk. So we make sure we have enough people working, right? We usually have lots of information collected on our customer. So when they walk in, we say, hello, Mr. Shoemaker, it's nice to see you again. We've prepared for their visit, right? We also, and the A is we anticipate. We anticipate if they've, in hospitality, we've known they've flown in all night on a red eye. We're not going to say, oh, how was your flight, right? But we anticipate what they're going to be like when they arrive. And so we make sure that we have a beautiful lobby and it's welcoming and it's well lit. And, maybe we have our own signature scent, or we have the color scheme, right? And all of that makes the customer feel really at home. And then we talk about engagement, right? How do we engage the customer? And obviously, Ritz-Carlton has their the 10-foot rule. At 10 feet away, you do X. When they get closer, you do something else, and all those kinds of things. So, and then that's what we talk about engagement. So in the book, we talk about what hotels have done to create great engagement. And then we talk about evaluate, right? Because that's the second E. We evaluate their stay. We go out and we do surveys in hospitality. In healthcare, we don't do that much. And then the final is we reward. We use loyalty programs to gather information and to make it easier for guests. And we think there's huge opportunity in healthcare for that. So that's kind of our model. But so we've applied it to healthcare. But I think if you're not in healthcare and you're listening to this podcast because you love hotels, think about, what am I doing to prepare for our guests? How am I anticipating their emotional reactions? How am I using color and scent to do that? How am I engaging, right? How am I evaluating their stay, and how am I rewarding? And I think you'll be able to see a really increase in customer satisfaction, which I think is exciting.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. That's absolutely fascinating. I spoke on another episode on this podcast a bit about the history of hotels and how, much of it was born out of America and out of the immigrants from the British system, and having the footmen and having all of these skills that were the kitchen staff and various palatial or royal houses, or hierarchical houses, let's say. And how then that was applied to work in a place where there were beds for rent. Right. Yes, it was Hattie Steele Harris on another episode. It was very interesting. I'd love to hear your take on that a bit, and a bit about the history of hospitality and hotels and what we can learn from that today.
Well, I think if you you think about Victor Hugo, right, when he wrote Les Miserables. Or sometimes we say in America, Les Miserable. But in Les Miserables, remember the hotelier? He was like a terrible person. And so what happened in the States really was we had the same kind of thing. And you'd have some really good hotels, some really bad hotels. And Kermit Wilson was a construction guy, architect, and he took his family from Memphis, Tennessee, to Washington, D.C. And he was appalled by the experiences he had. So he came home, he said, I'm going to build a hotel. And it was right around the time of Christmas. And Bing Crosby's Holiday Inn was out. So he goes, I'm going to call my hotel Holiday Inn. And he was really the first person that started making the rooms the standard size, putting all the standard amenities so that as a guest was traveling, you always were given a great experience. And there's, for a long time, their saying was, the best surprise is no surprise. So they were really one of the first to really standardize the hotel business. Mm. And over time, we became more standardized. And then we realized that customers have different wants and needs, right? When I'm traveling on business and someone else is paying, I want to have a really nice hotel because it's not my money. If I'm traveling with my family, a little more price conscious, so I want something smaller. So what hotels realized was we really need to have a different product for a different customer. And that same customer, one time they'll be spending a little money, a lot of different times they'll be spending a lot of money. So you saw hotels basically becoming, as brands, right? So Marriott's got 30 different hotels, all in different categories. Choice Hotels the same, and Hilton. And so we realized that customers have they want to buy a different type of experience. So let's make sure we have a hotel that provides that experience. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm just writing down now. You're giving me ideas for blogs.
and you look at, and so what happened then is in the late 1980s, when Steve Bolenbach was chief financial officer at Marriott, remember at one point Marriott owned hotels and they managed hotels. And Steve Bolenbach said, wait a minute, we can never grow if we have to own the hotels ourselves. So he split the company into two: Host Marriott, which was kind of the owner, and Marriott International, which was the operator. And pretty much every hotel took that same model. They became what we call asset light. They had other owners. They became franchisees, and they basically became brands. They would manage the brand. And Accor was really the last company to become asset light, right? Because they used to own everything. And once they became asset light, then they were able to grow exponentially. And
I was
so
actually...
hotel business. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I don't want to interrupt, but I was actually just reading about this the other day and the history and all of these chains. But then they all started having some problems when they didn't own the hotel. They were franchising out. They had then operators who weren't adhering to standards. And then many of the chains and the brands, some of them were stricter, some weren't, because they just cared about the fee that they were getting. And then it all kind of got a bit messy at some stage in hospitality history.
Yes, and it has gotten messy. And part of it is what they do is they reflag, they take away the flag from the owner. Or in some cases, what they do is that they like the owner, is they create a new brand, or they move them down a brand. So Accor has taken people that had a Sofitel and turned it into a Novotel, or they've taken a Novotel and turned it to an Ibis, right? And so what they've tried to do is to say, okay, if you're an owner and you don't have a lot of money to put into the brand, we'll have a brand that requires less. But we still really focus on the brand standards. So you stay at a Hilton, they have to have Hilton, you have to know you're in a Hilton. So we've gotten much better at doing that. And then we police the brands. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's fascinating. I don't know if you remember, me telling you, but our hotel was actually part of Sheraton Group back in the day. So when we opened in 1987, we were Sheraton brand up until 1996, but we broke
Okay.
away because didn't do us any good. But when I was at Cornell, one of your colleagues at the time was using examples and mentioned something about our hotel, and I was like, "Oh, we did that," and they were shocked because we were one of the few examples that we broke away without paying a penalty or compensation.
Well, actually, what's interesting, I think, the future, because we have the internet, right?
Hmm.
And because we have TripAdvisor and we have comments and we have blogs, it used to be that if I was traveling to a city, the only way I didn't know anything about hotels, so I would just say, well, I'm always going to stay at a Marriott or a Hilton or a Accor,
Mm.
right? Because I know the brand and all that. But now, if I want to go to Cyprus, I can go online and type in hotels in Cyprus. And if you have a really strong social media person and you have people that are writing great comments, now all of a sudden the knowledge that I didn't know beforehand that I had to rely on the brand to provide, now suddenly I can do it myself.
Gives
And
you
I
the
told my
confidence.
friend,
Yeah.
yeah, I told my friends at a major hotel brand, I said, your biggest threat is the person who's going to say, I don't necessarily need to have the brand. If I'm in a great location, I have a strong social media person, I can work with the OTAs because by the time sometimes I pay the franchise fees, the loyalty program fees, the brand standard fees, I could maybe do it cheaper. And then as guests become looking for more unique experiences, right? And that's why I think like Airbnb has taken off because people are going, I don't want to stay in the brand. I want my own personal experience. So I think the independent hotelier really has a huge opportunity to be successful as long as they can make sure that their web page and their social
Hmm.
media, digital marketing is driving people to the brand.
Yeah.
So
And of
it's an
course,
exciting
customer
time,
loyalty. Yeah.
customer loyalty. It's an exciting time to be in the hospitality space,
I couldn't agree more.
I
I
think.
love it. I love it. So, okay, I don't want to keep you too much, but I always ask everybody this at the end of an interview for a favorite quote. What's your favorite quote is?
So
Or
my favorite quote, and I say this all the time to students at graduation, and they always get a kick out of it because it's from Harry Potter, who I love, and it's our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities.
oh,
So
how
it's our
lovely.
choices, Harry, far that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities, and we all have choices, right? And so it's the choices we make that define our ability. So I think that's a great way to think about things. And my other quote that kind of relates to that, I'm a big Star Wars fan, is from Yoda, who says, he goes, try, his quote is, try not, do, or do not. There is no try, right? So our choices and doing are really
Mm,
my two favorite quotes.
yeah,
So
yeah. Nike, just do it. I love that. I'm going to make you laugh now. Here's your file from way back when. I'm sure it's all digital now. That's how long ago we were together. But good times, happy
yes,
times.
it was very
Um,
happy times.
okay, so for those of you who are listening to this and not watching it on YouTube, I'm holding up. Normally I have a crystal ball, but we're doing this in my office, not in the studio. So I have our logo seahorse little pot here. So you tell me when, because I have some questions here, random questions that the team
Okay,
put together. Tell me when.
okay,
Pull one
when?
out, pull one out. Here we go.
Yep.
Okay. And you have picked, drum roll. What do you wish the younger you had known?
I guess the younger me I wish I had known probably about consumer psychology at a younger age. I mean, I think I knew about it, but I didn't really understand it. So I think understanding really the importance of consumer psychology and how people think about things would have been a good thing to know earlier.
That's wisdom, isn't it? That's one of my favorite quotes. Wisdom would have been wasted on youth.
Right.
Would have been a lot less fun.
Yes.
A lot less fun. So yeah, you would have missed out on all the fun learning part along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
That's a good question. Yeah, and I think the other thing I think what happens when you're younger, you get focused on what other people think you should do. And you do things, like I'll give a good example about you get taken off your path of passion because someone says, oh, that you shouldn't do that.
Mm.
And when I was doing my PhD, I wrote a paper on neural networks. And neural networks are really the foundation for artificial intelligence and machine learning. Mm. And I tried to publish a paper, and it didn't get accepted. And they said, you shouldn't, why do we need machine learning when we have all these statistical packages that do things for us? So I didn't follow that path on machine learning and neural networks. And now they've become the foundation of everything, right? So I think if I had known earlier to really stick to what I'd loved and don't worry about what other people say, I would have picked up stuff a lot quicker. Mm. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I remember when I wrote a paper with a grad student on hospitality in healthcare, it didn't get accepted at a conference because they said, we're hospitality, has nothing to do with healthcare. So I didn't pursue that for like 2 or 3 years. And I wasted 2 or 3 years until I finally
It's not too bad. It could have been 2 or 3 decades. I think you're being harsh on yourself. I pulled this, sorry, I was looking down now. I pulled this quote out with, I think, Sophia Balascova on another podcast, but I love it. It's Winston Churchill who said, when you're 20, you care what everyone thinks. When you're 40, you stop caring what everyone thinks. And when you're 60, you realize no one was ever thinking about you in the first place.
Oh, I love that quote. That's a great quote. Please, you'll have to post that on your thing so everybody can
yes,
see.
I'll post it on LinkedIn later and then you can share it.
Yes, that's a great quote.
And it's so true. So if we leave a parting thought to everyone who's listening to this, you just do you, be yourself, be proud of who you are, and follow Stowe's advice, buy his books. And I think whatever field you're in, not just if you're in literally a hospital or medical environment or hotels, I think any business can learn so much from hospitality and definitely leadership. I would say that from my experience, teamwork, and really hospitality is a microcosm. I mean, this comes up over and over again on this podcast, how people who've studied hotel management or lived it one way or another, it's a whole little village that we're here. So there's so much to be learned from this industry. So thank you so much for sharing and being with us.
Oh, it's great to be here, and it's great to see you again. And we'll definitely keep in touch. And my email will be posted on your web thing.
Definitely, we're going to put all the links, below.
Yeah, so then people can write to me, and as an academic, we've published a lot of articles. Happy to send to anything people want.
That's so nice. Thank you so much.
I always say, once a student, always a student.
Absolutely, student of life. I think that's when you know your time is up, when you stop learning.
That's right.
Absolutely. Here's to learning.
Yes. Thank you very much for the great opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button because it helps us more than you may realize. If you are planning on coming to visit us at St Raphael Resort and Marina, feel free to email our reservations team quoting Hotel Talk and receive an exclusive offer just for you. We look forward to seeing you soon, hearing your feedback about our show, and producing many, many more interesting episodes just for you, our listener, and our valued guest in mind. Thank you so much, and take care.